Our discussion today is around sort of, the purpose and value of a human resource senior management structure in a business of whatever size. And I guess you might expect somebody with my background to be 100% behind the idea of all businesses need a great HR director. So, perhaps I ought to open by saying I actually don't believe that's the case. I think that businesses evolve into a size where it's important that they begin to think about the seniority and the special skills of their human resources senior person.
Well, I think that I suppose I need to be convinced, and I think that where my current position is that we have an outsourced HR director that does 2 days a month, gives us a health check, and we have an internal HR admin resource. And previously, we used to work with Mentor, which was a NatWest product, when we used to have all our corporate banking there, which was a fascinating service. It helped us with all our templates for our job descriptions and our contracts, and also legislation. We sort of outgrew that when we got to about 100 staff, and then we bought another company. And then we had a huge integration plan, which took us 100 days to do. We had a 100-day plan, and we bought a company which is a size of 40 staff. We were then 80 staff members because we totaled 120, and we had the challenge of integrating a whole team. At that point, we employed a specific HR specialist to help us through that process to make sure that we did everything correct and legal, and also for the benefit of our staff and also our new staff. And it all went very well indeed. And so we thought, well, how can we keep this HR resource, because we were impressed with them, but we didn't want to have a full-time HR director. So we sort of took a compromise route, and we knew we sort of outgrew Mentor, but the HR director, albeit only 2 days a month, seems to work for us currently with our current size.
Yes.
Because in addition to our admin resource, we have our individual department managers, who are directors of the business, all looking after their own complement of staff. So they have the overall framework and the employee manual and handbook to work with, the induction pack. And then they look after all the different issues and escalate them to our HR admin or our HR resource if any issues do arise.
Right.
So for our current size, I'd say we seem to be coping very well, and there's nothing really outstanding for us. And I suppose my question would be, at what point does a business need to really look at is it a number of staff driven position, or is it just a demand on HR?
I always think about the work of the senior HR person in sort of two blocks. It's simplifying it a little bit in 2 blocks. There's, first of all, the downward review of the HR function. What's happening out there in terms of how we interact with the employees in the organisation. Are HR administrators, in your case, or any outsourced provider, really providing a both consistent in terms of the administration, but consistent culturally service to our employees? Do our employees see some sort of plan of how we want to treat employees and say, oh, I understand that all links together, whether it's from recruiting, retraining, retaining, developing, rewarding, engaging. And sometimes if you outsource or leave that responsibility at a very junior level in the organisation, those bits don't connect. And employees can be, at times, quite cynical about that if they see something very different happening in the way they were brought in to the way they're then rewarded, or the way that they're promoted, or the way that they're developed. The other one is actually working with the senior team. Being a fully fledged member of the senior team, somebody who can support and challenge the CEO. Now, I've worked in a lot of businesses where I've come to appreciate, A, why I wouldn't be a CEO or couldn't be a CEO, but also how lonely the role of CEO can be at times in an organisation. And a good human resources director can provide the listening, the feedback, the challenge to a CEO in that lonely situation. They can also be the person who actually holds a mirror up to the CEO in terms of whether he or she is reflecting the values of the organisation all the time, whether they are aware of how the senior team itself is developing and what's happening in the senior team. They're 2 quite different roles that a HR director plays, and I think there is a scale point or an issue point in an organisation where that becomes a worthwhile investment to make. I can't give you an answer as to is it 120 people, 140 people, 170 people. I think it is a sort of an intuitive decision where a CEO says, I think I need somebody who encapsulates all of that now.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah, certainly with our business, we do give a lot of responsibility to our senior execs. And we have a senior executive meeting every month, of which on the agenda every month is HR issues. So we do speak a lot about consistencies, and a lot of the stuff you've mentioned already, which is very encouraging. We seem to cover as a senior exec team, which is great. And I do think that there will be a stage when, if we do go internationally, or if we expand by another 20, 30, 40%, that we probably will need to really beef up and create a separate HR resource. I think currently, even with 170 people, we seem to have been able to manage it very well.
You're right, well, the goal of any good HR function is to have a fully functioning line management team who are very good people managers. There is a point where if a business is planning for growth and thinking about growth, where one has to be careful that you're staffed ready for it rather than bringing people in after the event. You've handled one acquisition, it sounds very well. I always think sort of like getting somebody in there, if you are planning to sort of double the size, whatever the business plan is, double the size, sometimes it's about bringing people in ahead of the curve a little bit and having somebody who really can connect, as I said, all of those parts of people's strategy. So thinking about the benefits that a senior HR practitioner can bring at that board level, in the senior team level, I think there is something important about having somebody there who can set a people strategy that makes sure the business is fit for the future. Different roles on that board have different timescales and perspectives that they concentrate on. And in my experience, a good HR director is one of the people who's looking slightly further ahead than most. And I suppose one of the most important areas that in my experience, my personal experience, the HR director keeps a real focus on is what's the engagement score for our business. Not just what is it in absolute terms, what's the trend? How is it moving year on year, month on month, week on week? Because I believe very strongly that the engagement trend is directly correlates to the success of the business. That as soon as you start seeing engagement dip off in a business, from a commercial point of view, if I could have all of those figures for every company in the FTSE, I think my investment strategy financially would be really well educated, because that's a really crucial thing that I think sometimes gets overlooked. Now, a good CEO is probably trying to keep their antennae open on that, and on a business of a certain size can keep their antennae going on that by getting around and talking to people. But there's no substitute for giving people the opportunity behind the scenes to say, what do you really think of our business? And do you think as well of it now as you did 3 months ago, or 2 months ago, or a year ago, so that we can look at what we've got to do to change that, to keep people fully on board. I saw a great piece of research by Towers Watson about 4 or 5 years ago, which demonstrated this direct correlation between employee engagement and commercial success. Now, of course, there's a virtuous circle going on here that as organisations are getting more successful, their employees tend to feel better about the organisation if they're invested in. But which comes first, the chicken or the egg? The driver, first of all, was getting your employees to feel really committed to the organisation, understand the organisation, know where the organisation's going, and then success comes. And I think, certainly as a HR director, that's what I've concentrated on in each of the last 3 places that I've worked. And I think that's the decision you've got to make. When do I need somebody like that?
Okay, very valid, I think. No, valid points. And I think that certainly I would look at return on the investment. The investment is something which is going to be quite large for a decent HR director, because I suppose my personal experience from previous organisations, whether it be ones I work for or others, ones I've dealt with, is that some HR directors I've come across have been fairly ineffective insofar as they've created jobs to do, but it's not really been a return on investment. I can see the value in really getting under the skin of employees at all different levels and finding out what their engagement is, because that will help you plan your strategy and make sure that you can either change things to make people more engaged or recruit others who could do the same or a better job. So I can see the value on that point. So that's an interesting one. That's a big tick. So that's one step to convincing me, right. which is good. Something which we haven't done as a business. We haven't really, apart from a management viewpoint, really gone to the grassroots level, right. and asked people directly, apart from in yearly appraisals, which we do, yes. what they think about the organisation.
I think you're right to be sceptical, not cynical, sceptical about what a human resources director might bring in terms of plans and projects. Just like any other board member, should come to the board and should be properly interrogated about the commercial value of everything he or she wants to do.
So, once the HR director makes that sort of challenge and they say, right, okay, we're going to grow by 50% in our sales turnover, we're going to need 30 staff to come in to help. We currently sell 3 million tickets in our case. How can we sell 4.5 million tickets? So if I was to say, right, I want to get a HR director in here, what timescale would I look at positive structure changes and therefore return on the investment in that resource for my business?
Your decision to bring in a HR director should be part of a challenge that says, look, I need somebody who is going to review all of these key people metrics and drive an improvement in each of them that we can calculate as paid, over the cost of bringing you in. I think one of the challenges the HR director should do in their early doors, in the last 3 jobs I've gone into, within 6 weeks, I presented a document to the CEO in the business saying, right, I've done my listening and questioning and challenging, and I've poured over all the metrics, and here's what I think we could be doing to support the business plan more effectively, and here's the benefit, the hard-line benefit you're going to get if we bring about this improvement on turnover, this improvement on retention, this improvement on engagement.
So therefore, then you'd say that probably the best way of doing that would be to get a HR director that would sign up for some fairly challenging KPIs for reward once they've achieved it after a year.
Well, sometimes bringing in interim people, I've seen that happen, or you get a different sort of animal. Certainly tying all of the senior team, including the HR director's rewards, to that sort of delivery of objectives is something I'd support very strongly.